A big, strong man was sitting next to my mother on our green and white webbed aluminum glider. Magically, he had fixed my bicycle. This big man's name was Bert Cole, and he was a veteran of World War II. I jumped into his lap. My mother married him soon afterward. I had a long and difficult relationship with Bert Cole, who died in 2006 at the age of 88. Despite our struggles, I helped care for him at the end. I remember sitting one night in room 452 of the regional hospital in Venice, Florida, watching him breathe as the clock silently witnessed our last time together, quieter and more serene than any before. That night I slept on a sofa in his room. I was determined that my second father would not disappear like my first, without my being there. The next morning, when my siblings and my mother arrived for the day's death watch, Bert's eyes were closed. His head hung to the left of the pillow, his slack mouth wide open, the look of the dying. No more use for the false teeth or glasses waiting on the nightstand. No more beeping from heart monitors or sounds of air whistling through breathing tubes. Only gurgling lungs and long, irregular breaths disturbed the silence. As we watched over him, Bert suddenly woke up with a start, eyes wide as saucers. He looked around to see who was there. We 3 children and Jackie, all present and accounted for. Bert settled back against the pillow and closed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking or what he understood. By turns we talked to him, kissed him, and petted his head. He smiled and nodded each time. We contacted as many grandchildren as we could and held the phone up to his ear as each one spoke to him. He gestured and spoke toothlessly back. When my sister's daughter Sarah spoke to him, he virtually shouted with joy, waving with his cold, bloated left hand. He spoke with his sister Sally. Then I suggested that we leave the room and give Jackie some private time to talk with him. "I don't think I can do it," she sobbed. "Of course you can," I said, taking her face between my hands and kissing her forehead. After my mother talked to Bert, the 4 of us drove a few miles up Route 41 to Mi Pueblo for dinner. Halfway through the meal, the hospital nurse called. He was gone. I drove back to the hospital and sat with him until his body was taken to the morgue. When I turned 60, I began reading and thinking seriously about becoming an old man myself. The following year, I underwent a difficult neck surgery to take pressure off peripheral nerves that were causing pain and weakness in my right arm. I began to read scholarly work about men and old age, memoirs and essays by old men, in particular Cicero, Malcolm Cowley, Donald Hall, and Roger Angell, and the fiction of Philip Roth, especially his slim novel Everyman. At the same time, I was watching popular films whose main characters were aging men played by Hollywood stars who were themselves aging: Harrison Ford, Sylvester Stallone, Clint Eastwood, and Tommy Lee Jones. Most of all, I was captivated and haunted by the film adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's novel No Country for Old Men, whose main character, the aging sheriff Ed Tom Bell, is faced with the overwhelming violence and terror of the Mexican drug trade. Set in a small Texas town, the movie is filled with bloody scenes of dead smugglers, mercenaries, and townspeople. But unlike the violent, hyper-masculine aging heroes in westerns such as Unforgiven or Cowboys and Aliens, Sheriff Ed Tom Bell renounces violence and relinquishes the social scaffolding of middle-aged manhood. Faced with firepower that he cannot match and a kind of evil he cannot understand, Bell decides to retire. On a cold, blustery day, he turns in his badge and walks out of the courthouse for the last time, the world utterly beyond his control. Bell sits in his truck for a few minutes, bitter and defeated. Like many aging men, Bell is no longer sure who he is.